tentatively wanted to do it.
All right, good evening. It's Monday, August 19th, 2019, Public Safety Building Committee meeting. We have 6 members present. The other 3 are unable to attend tonight. This hopefully will be our last meeting outside of the building, although we could have technically met there. Given that it does have a temporary certificate of occupancy, I think it was best to give the team a little more time to clean it up and spruce it up before we open it up to the public. So I think that's the plan for our next meeting on September 9th, which we'll go through the meeting schedule at the end. First action item is going to be approval of meeting minutes from August 5th, 2019. Were there any comments from Mr. Lyons? I noticed one very minor he instead of the. So I'll show you where to strike the T. I think it was in the first page. But other than that, I had nothing. Anyone have any other comments? Then I will move that we accept the meeting minutes as edited. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wood. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? And 1 abstention, David. Chairman's update. So the first item is substantial completion. So as you all saw from the press release that was issued last week, we have received a temporary certificate of occupancy for the building. However, Jeff, who ultimately is the one that has to certify substantial completion, has not certified substantial completion. We'll walk through kind of what's going on when we get to their updates. I think it's a very fluid process, and we continue to have our regularly scheduled Tuesday meetings. In my personal belief, and Jeff and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're definitely in the driver's seat as the owners of the building at this point, in that we're able to do what we need to do to get the departments operational, but at the same time are holding, kind of the checkbook, so to say, over the contractor's shoulder to finish certain items. I'll have Jeff kind of walk through the major items, but I think from a non-paperwork perspective, I think the largest thing is getting the elevator inspection. It was inspected. There was an item that needed to be fixed, so that needs to be re-inspected, I think, before there's any sort of discussion of substantial completion. So again, I'll have Jeff go through kind of the finer details when we get to his update, but we are definitely making progress in the right direction there.
If you want, I can give you an update on the elevator right now.
Go.
So in talking to CTA today, they have requested a quick turnaround for the elevator, but now they're chasing down the state, and they have not responded. So here we are, just about a week later now, from when the elevator was inspected, when it failed its inspection. They did make several corrections to the elevator that were needed by the state. However, now it's, well, I did it before, now I'll be back when I have time. So that's where we are right now. We have no date as to when they're coming back.
And I think as a reminder, contractually, we're at about $1,500 a day for every day that passes it, calendar or business days?
Believe, I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Right. At least business days. So and that clock started at the end of last Tuesday. So in terms of opening, I think at the last meeting we had discussed the desire to kind of link the rededication of the memorial to the actual anniversary of September 11th. For a lot of reasons, we decided to decouple those events. So we are going to have a short ceremony on September 9th at 7:30 a.m. It'll be quick, short, sweet, and out of there before the buses start entering for Woodward. We've coordinated with the school, and then the police and fire departments will be doing kind of their own standard tradition to rededicate the memorial on 9/11 itself. I think it's really important to highlight that the opening ceremony on the 9th is not going to be any sort of ribbon cutting. It's more just a quick celebration. The chiefs had a couple of good, quick ideas of what we could do to really celebrate the first day of operations out of that building. There will be no public tours or visits that day. And then we will do the grand opening with the formal ribbon cutting on Saturday, October 26th. That's going to be from 10 until 2. We've had initial planning meetings with both chiefs. We've secured Choate Field to make sure that there's no recreation events during that same time, both from a parking and logistical perspective, but also to enable both departments to do any sort of demonstrations that don't necessarily fit within the confines of the building itself. So I think more logistics will kind of trickle on out as we get closer to that date. But I think those are really the important dates to highlight as we're out in the community and people ask us questions. You can now drive up into the facility. So I think the other thing I wanted to highlight under monthly project-related updates is most likely on Thursday, there'll be a filming to educate the public on how they should be accessing that facility, to not impede emergency vehicle traffic, but also at the same time, so they know how to get to the golf facility and how they get to conduct police or fire business out front. Just having I was with Kevin for about an hour on Friday and just kind of watching some people try to navigate the site. I think more education is needed. I think I've been assured with time that people will learn the traffic patterns, but it is obviously, given that Woodward was shut down over the weekend for their own paving project, I think there's just a learning curve that's going to occur here over time. So, that is to come. And with school starting next week, I think we'll get a pretty good test next week. Any questions on any of that? I'm going to move on to change order ownership. So this has been on the agenda a long time. Jeff and I have gone back and forth, and I do have a proposal to bring back to the committee. To me, I think it's important that the committee vote and support the proposal. If members are not in favor of it, then I think we'll kind of have to go back to the drawing board. I've told Jeff to that extent, my views and kind of bringing something to the table for discussion are candidly only my views, and the committee may view to do something completely different. Without going into every fine detail, I think, what I tried to do is encapsulate feedback that occurred during all of our public meetings and try to bring together kind of where the committee had concerns with what I'll call large items as part of the project. I think any of us would have been naive to kind of pass over kind of, a nut or a bolt was missing here or there. I think, when you look at general projects and you look at what the standard, what I'll call errors and omissions are, we had some extensive conversations with Vertex just to get guidance on what they've seen on other projects. We kind of tried to take the whole project into, into that, look at what the town's involvement was, what the scope of work we thought we were getting from context was, and, bring that all together. So where we have landed is that Jeff has agreed to waive the invoice that we would have seen at our next meeting, which was $31,750, which would have been the last month of construction administration. And we've agreed to, there is a pending invoice for the same amount for last month. We've agreed to move it in such a way that we would pay $21,750 of that and hold back $10,000 for obviously successful completion of the project. I think it's important on that $10,000, we wouldn't, if we chose not to release it down the road, it would be because of something we're made aware of from this date forward, as opposed to rehashing any sort of old history, would be kind of, the rationale there. So we obviously need the design team to finish out the project. They hold the keys to a lot of things. But also I thought it was in the best interest of the town to obviously make Jeff as whole as we thought he was gonna be, but also, hold back something like we're doing with most all other vendors, just to make sure we really get this thing into the back of the end zone as opposed to the front of the end zone. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments around that before I move that we accept that recommendation.
Is someone going to draft a contract amendment, or how's that going to work? Right, because that's not what the contract reads that we have with you. Is there someone doing a letter or someone memorializing the agreement?
We could. It's certainly been my preference that we could just adjust our invoicing, and what I would end up doing is adjusting the final invoice to show a credit, which would encapsulate whatever the final amount is. So it looks like it's 100% at the end of the day. The contract's 100%. I mean, if we all wanted to do the amendment because we weren't certain of something, I certainly could, but I think there's enough written correspondence on this issue that if anybody was questioning it, we could go back to that correspondence to find the true intent.
Fair enough.
Questions on this side? Any questions on this side? So with that, I'm going to move that we accept the offer from Context to waive the last construction administration invoice of $31,750 and to hold back $10,000 on the outstanding invoice until successful completion of the project. Is there a second? Second. Is there any further conversation? All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. While we're on the topic, because we didn't really know how it was gonna go, Jeff has an invoice out there for $31,750 that John Lemieux did not bring forward to us last month, just because he knew of the ongoing conversations. So I would like to approve that, I'm gonna make a motion that we approve release of $21,750 of that. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
No,
All-
that's reflects the agreement that you just told us about.
Right, but then we need to also approve
Right.
invoices to be paid, and
Got it.
because we weren't gonna do this cat and mouse game of what if the committee doesn't agree and
Fair
have
enough.
Jeff issue 10 different invoices, I think this was the easier way to go.
Very good.
So, motion's been made, motion's been seconded. Is there any further conversation? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Updates from owner's project manager and design team. So, you guys can take this wherever you want to go, but I think it's really important to articulate to the committee what you're doing to kind of get this to substantial completion. Do you see any impact to the operations beginning there on September 3rd in terms of the 911 cutover? And really, anything else that's on your mind that you think the committee should be aware of day to day?
No, you want me to go first, you want to go first?
Go for it.
All right, so right now, we are continuing with all the landscaping around the property. They're also like, Mr. Flame is there right now, doing IT work on the building. We also have several subcontractors working throughout the day to do fencing inside the building, around the building, plantings all the way around the building. Punch list work is being performed every single day. At this time, we don't see anything jarring that would alert us that September 3rd would not happen. Everybody does realize with all the private vendors that we have, the town vendors, that they have a certain deadline to meet as well as taking care of some punch list items that they themselves have caused. So we're trying to get our hands around exactly what extent that punch list work will be and how much that will be and who's gonna pay for it. So we're working with those issues. That's an everyday occurrence, trying to get some of them moved up because one of the items that CTA brought up to me today was they're looking at the possibility of hiring Delta Beckwith to operate the elevator for Dunnigan to come in and do all their work. Dunnigan really wants to use the elevator, so some of their equipment is heavier than other items. They put themselves off in the queue until later in the month. We're gonna try to get that expedited, so just another item we don't have to worry about, so it's not gonna be a bottleneck at the end.
Sorry, what does Dunnigan do?
Dunnigan is furniture. They're also
That's what I
doing
thought.
lockers from the police station and certain other aspects of the job, along with WB Mason. And their work usually is dependent upon an elevator. It's not mandated in the contract that we signed that we were gonna give them an elevator, but it's one of those things where, well, we can't bring these. And when we allowed them to do it the first time, I won't lie, they did ding the walls and this, that, and the other thing. And CTA was gracious enough to take care of those items because they were right there in front of them. But we do have several things that just need to fall into place. Weight equipment is coming again tomorrow. Weight equipment is there. They're gonna be all doing this together, putting it all together. And the biggest things right now are the fire-rated door for one of the dorm rooms is still waiting to come in, as well as a window into the workout space, the health space, and several other smaller items, but the most noticeable one are the countertops, which we're still waiting on. We have temporary ones right there, and then the last one would be the electrical light inside the holding cell that we're trying to figure out right now with the pick caulking and the actual fixture itself. So we're working on that, and Jeff, if you have anything else, I think that's just about everything. We've done the paving, and they're still working on the monument, putting the pavers around there as well.
Have the
Yes.
cells been inspected by the state yet? Is that-
Cells have been inspected by the state. There was an issue with one of the lights. We're trying to take care of that light right now.
There's supposedly a one-day turnaround, once they're ready to come back out.
Yeah, there was a specific list of items given to the department, and that was ultimately turned over to the contractor. Because some of the items were departmental things that they need to get in order, and the chief knew that this was likely not gonna pass, and they weren't anticipating moving in right away anyways. So there's a few things he still needed to get done, which I think he's tackling. But then there were some building-related things, as Kevin mentioned, that contractor hadn't completed yet, or there was an issue. So they have that list, and that's on the punch list to get complete.
It shouldn't be a problem getting that done before September 3rd and inspected.
No, I don't think, no, shouldn't be a problem with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on status? I think the second floor is clean, the first floor, they were working on it even on Friday.
I don't know if you want to get into, at this point, the substantial completion stuff?
I
You
think
wanna-
you should, yeah.
So there's a list in the specifications of requirements. So the way it works is the contractor is supposed to make us aware ahead of time that they are anticipating getting to the point of substantial completion by a certain date. Usually it's on the schedule already, but prior to getting to that date, we have to perform an inspection, which is typically called the punch list inspection. But prior to that, there is a nine-item list that they have to provide to us in order for us to schedule the inspection. Some of these things happen almost simultaneously, other things should be given to us beforehand. But I'll preface this by saying many of these things, because of the speed at which we were working to get to the final date on the calendar, had not been done as of the date of last Tuesday. And so for many of these reasons, we have not issued the certificate of substantial completion. But the biggest one by far is the elevator. Substantial completion is defined as the date by which the work is ready for the owner to occupy it for its intended purpose. So things like landscaping, things, minor things, wouldn't impede that. It is somewhat subjective. It's in our opinion, but also it's in the town's opinion and the department's opinion of whether or not certain items rise to that level. But it's pretty practical, the way you would look at it is, can the public safely walk into the building? Can the department safely, and for its intended purpose, operate the building? So if the detention area is not ready, the police department can't use the building. Pretty simple. If the elevator's not running, public can't get there, staff can't get to the second floor, potentially not ready. So there's changeover of insurance requirements that have to happen, although I think the contractor has reasonably notified the town of the insurance changeover, and I believe the town is in the process of working with the insurance vendor to make that happen. So I think generally that's okay. Warranties have to be submitted to us, maintenance agreements and final certifications. We have received many of them from CTA, and they're being reviewed right now by our office. We need to receive the lien waiver, which CTA gave us after last Tuesday, so we have that in our possession now. Certificate of occupancy is required. Of course, in this case, the town has agreed to abide by a temporary certificate of occupancy, but in reality, the contractual requirement is a permanent certificate of occupancy, or final certificate of occupancy. So the town has bent backwards a little bit to release the contractor from that full requirement, but we know there's a list of items that are still required for them to be completed to get the permanent CO. So technically, that's been not completed, but we have got the TCO. We have a list of attic stock, which spare materials, extra materials, tile, carpet, paint, not so much paint, but base, ceiling tiles, things that you might need to replace stock in the building. That's been received. We're still waiting on a comprehensive list of what's been delivered. Vertex is gonna confirm that list when we get it, but we have to make sure we've gotten all that from the contractor. Transfer of the permanent locks. So the key system and the locking system, we don't give that to the contractor. They have to arrange for the cores, the lock cores and keys to be transferred to the owner and then installed. And many times the contractor will walk around with the owner and install all of them for them, or the owner's locksmith will do it. In this case, because of the substantial amount of punch list work with the contractor, we've all agreed, both us and CTA and the town, that it makes no sense to put the locks in, because then you gotta have people with keys letting the contractors into every room. So that's going to be delayed a bit. Startup testing and balancing of the systems has been done, but commissioning has not been done. That's actually a requirement for substantial completion. So we will be looking for that, as well as training of the town's personnel on the systems. So that is scheduled for next week, I believe. So commissioning has been ongoing. They've done the startups and reports for the initial unit startups. They've now produced their deficiencies log that the contractor has to work against, and then once the responses have been prepared for that, the commissioning agent will come back and actually perform the final testing of a subset of the equipment.
Is that an agent under your control or state's control?
The town is,
Yes.
it's a third party through Vertex. They've contracted for the services, but it's under basically the town's commissioning agent. And they've been part of this process through to this
Very long
point.
time, yeah.
But the CXA has given them a list of things that CTA has to provide before they can schedule that testing.
I'm just curious on balancing the system. That's
Yes.
balancing the
Air.
HVAC, right?
The air and the water side, which did occur as of last Tuesday, and that was a requirement to get the
Right.
affidavit from our mechanical engineer.
I always thought that those things are very delicate, and you have to be in the building and use it. Is there a provision in the contract that has them come back if there's an issue? Or is
So
that just relying on the warranty?
absolutely, the town has warranties with all the contractors for a year, and it's expected that there will be callbacks for things like that. You know, particularly since we're in the middle of summer, and there's gonna be an issue in spring when the air conditioning system kicks back on again, that something's gonna be tweaked, that needs to be retweaked. So that's definitely going to happen, but the balancing is typically done before the occupants are in the building. It's more of a mathematical exercise to make sure that CFM you're getting from supply is balanced with the return, and you're getting the design CFM for each room, so the air changes and the amount of air being delivered to each room matches the design values, or at least comes close enough the design engineer is comfortable with it. But the commissioning agent also looks at that and then does further testing to confirm the system is operating per the original design characteristics. That all has to get done before we give them certificate of substantial completion. And I'm on the last one now, but touch-up, cleaning, and repair and restoration. So that really has to do with the punch list that we created with CTA walking around through the building. And I think there's an innumerable amount of pages on the punch list of items that have to be done, as some of you know. And that is something that has probably the most subjective of all of it, because something like, touching up a little spot of paint on a windowsill certainly isn't going to prevent occupancy and use of the building for its intended purpose. However, because it's a police station, public safety facility, we've stressed from the beginning, it's really important to have a majority, if not all of the punch list done, really before the town takes occupancy of it. That's not exactly the way it's written in contractual requirements, but it's pretty close, and we have a lot of discretion there. So this will be the one that, if anything CTA wants to complain about, will be the one they complain about, telling us that we're being too nitpicky, or some of these things shouldn't be prerequisites to the substantial completion. But that's what we'll really need to see. We'll have to come back and do a back punch of the list to actually be able to determine that they've completed enough that the remaining items don't rise to the level of us withholding the certificate of substantial completion. So we haven't issued it yet. I expect tomorrow morning we'll take another walkthrough, take a look at what's been done, and we'll see how much more time they might need. And I expect that will happen until we get to final completion. As Jason said, the amount of money they have to spend, and I did look it up, it looks like it's per day, not per working day, is going to continue to ratchet up, so that will keep the pressure on them to get the work resolved, and I'm sure it'll be a point of discussion for tomorrow's meeting.
And I guess I would say, the sense of urgency that I saw from that team getting up to the 13th was probably unprecedented to what I had seen the 14 months before that. And as much as obviously, we were forewarned by all parties here, I think we should pause and kind of thank all parties, whether it, well, CTA context and Vertex. I mean, to accomplish some of the things and some of the words I can't say type of calls that I received on a daily basis the week leading up to that, and to see how the town and that the whole collective crew here worked through it. Pretty impressive stuff, and kind of goes to kind of the tenor of the overall project. I mean, there were many times Kevin would call me and be like, "Oh, this is the item that we're just never going to be able to resolve," and I just felt like every time, like the team, and every part, every department, every consultant really rallied, and that includes the general contractor, I think. So I've tried to stress that in the meeting last week when we were kind of sitting there knowing that we were gonna hit, a temporary certificate of occupancy that day. It was nice to see that kind of sense of urgency, and I'm hoping that obviously now that there's a financial piece to it, that continues, just because I don't think we want to be talking about changing any sort of operational impact. I think the chiefs have done a great job trying to manage what's the best thing for the departments and minimizing impact on operations, and I think we're hopefully there, but just wanted to pause and say that as part of their update.
Yep.
Do you have something, John?
Yeah, before I forget, Jeff, as-bills, are we owed paper copies and PDFs?
Electronic as-built. Technically, we're owed CAD files, and we'll be pushing for that. As Kevin can probably attest, we've had some projects where we were stomping on the contractor's neck for a year, waiting for as-bills to be done, and Weston was one of those. But at a minimum, we'll get the PDFs from them, definitely, and then we'll be pushing for those CAD files as well.
I would recommend holding money until then, because
Yeah.
it was months
yeah.
and months before I even saw the books.
Yes.
It can get quite expensive to redo all the as-bills if they do not follow through. And there's some of them that they don't believe they own, and that's just something we'll work out with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's all carefully laid out in the specs and requirements of the contract, and I should also say that even though we will eventually give them substantial completion, all that does is create a monetized list of remaining items, basically a laundry list of remaining items, and each one has a value of money assigned to it. So when CTA completes one, we can know exactly how much they're due for that item. So if something like as-built, we could hold $25,000 or something for that item. So if CTA doesn't do it, town never pays them for it, and theoretically, it's enough money for the town to go out and procure whatever services they need to finish that item. So that's one way to get to final completion after you get to substantial completion.
Is that list in the process of being created on a daily basis now?
Well, technically, it's whatever's remaining left to do from the list that we have currently.
Are the values on it now?
We wouldn't bother to monetize it at this point. Basically, we're gonna try to keep as much of that contract value. I mean, CTA will submit an application for payment pretty soon, actually, for the month of August, and that's the one we'll be scrutinizing, us and Vertex, really carefully to make sure. We're actually looking at it backwards this time, not how much have they completed, but how much is left in the bank, so that we know how much we need to reserve to complete it.
We also still have all of our retainage from both phase 1 and phase 2 at this point,
That's right.
which is 5% of the overall contract. Any other questions for Jeff and Kevin on specific progress? All right, then I'm gonna move on to the facilities department request. So at our last meeting, we previewed a request from John Parent. There was a lot of detail, there was a cover memo. And then he took kind of the general reaction of the committee. He went back and worked with the chiefs to figure out what they really need to maintain the space. I think the committee was on record as saying, we obviously want to maintain the space, but we don't want to just go buy 10 of all the same thing, if we really only need 2 of it. So I think the request is down to approximately $20,500. The request is, all the details of which are in the packet. Obviously, we want the equipment to be there so that they can start cleaning the building the first day of use. So I thought it was important to bring it back now as opposed to waiting until September. My personal own reservation, which Mark has helped to get me over, is a lot of these things are things that the departments will continue to buy on a short life, and not over the 25 years that will remain on the bond. Mark has assured me that when they go back out to kind of bond the final piece of this, there's gonna be a bond for about 500,000 to $1 million of 5 years or less from a term perspective, that's how he and Brian are planning to kind of borrow kind of the last piece of the project. I think this is consistent with some of the conversation we had earlier on shorter lived assets. I think we had it when Tom was here, and some of the IT equipment, computers, phones, and radios are probably a little longer than 5 years, but certainly not 25 years. So, that's the intention, is that we're not gonna be, this mop, for example, that you see in here, or a vacuum, we're not gonna be borrowing the cost of that over 25 years. So, to me, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's a reasonable request to make sure we maintain the building, because save a penny now, it's gonna cost you a lot more later. So I think we're kind of putting the departments and the cleaning provider with the right equipment to maintain the building based on the chief's and the facility director's requests. So I don't know if there's any questions on it. Is everyone comfortable with a motion on it? All right, so I'm gonna move that we accept the request from the facilities department as a one-time request for startup of the building. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Officer. Is there any further discussion?
That's the 20,903.
Yeah. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? I have one abstention.
And one abstention.
Invoices for approval, so these were separated into two buckets. There was one that came through with Vertex invoices. There's two invoices, as well as an invoicing summary. I think it's important just to kind of walk through why there's two invoices, not one, and kind of where Vertex is overall, just so that there's no surprises going forward. So they ended up hiring our commissioning agent, which John just asked a question about not too long ago. From a budgetary perspective, we had commissioning as one budget line item, and we had owner's project manager as a separate line item. So I asked John Lemieux to separate out those invoices, just so it was very clear. We thought we were paying the commissioning agent directly, it ends up going through Vertex. We're not paying a markup, so really, the arrangement that they came into really has no impact on the town. They just help to facilitate some of the paperwork, so that's why you see two invoices. Because of this, as well as some of the other golf items they've handled, you'll see the money at the bottom of their invoices is creeping up to kind of what they had already asked for. So John has created that schedule now to kind of maintain, this is true OPM services, and this is kind of some of the other stuff that we've handled for you, but are coming out of multiple different line items, like Mark's golf budget, or other line items on our budget. Because we've gone beyond the project timeline, right? They thought they were gonna be out of here, let's just say July 1st was when we get substantial completion. They knew that there would be a ramp downtime. They wouldn't just pack up and leave. They are still projecting somewhat within budget. They're not gonna guarantee that they're not going over. So they just wanted to put us on notice. I think a lot of where we go with their budget is gonna be what the town asked of them. So I think one of the examples John Lemieux had given me was, well, when the chiefs have a problem with some part of the building in 3 months, are they gonna call Vertex to deal with it? Or are we gonna deal with it directly? And I think the answer that Mark has affirmed, kind of from a facilities perspective, is that's the job of the facilities director in town. So we wouldn't be using a third party once kind of we get through what we contractually have with Context in CTA. And then it's our building to kind of figure out service and warranty. So I just think we need to be on notice. I don't think there's any, I told John I don't want any amendments. We're not going above the budget yet, but we need to continue to watch it very closely. I think once we get through the August invoice, you probably hit the budget pretty hard first couple weeks of August is my guess.
Yes.
7 days a week sort of hitting the budget. So I just think it'll be important to kind of monitor that, but I don't think we're looking at any sort of gross overage. I think there's also some items from the past that will come up, similar to, in fairness to context, items that will come up for kind of discussion of how we fully resolve, that we've kind of agreed to see where we end up and go from there. So, go ahead, John.
Will there be a continuing need to engage Vertex, and if so, is that on an hourly basis?
It always is, that
Yep.
they're our only contract that's hourly. So I don't know, Kevin, if you want to maybe just articulate where you think other communities have gone, given the phase, and what you kind of see maybe Bill's role being over the next couple weeks, and how your role.
Basically, what we foresee happening right now is that, once we're done with CTA being complete with their work, there's always been a need to, okay, we're looking for this, do you have this document, do you have that? Can you come back for this inspection, or we found something on the roof? We've done that for all of our past clients. I definitely foresee doing it again here, just for the size of the building. And in that case, it would be basically on an as-needed basis. I don't want to throw out a number that, and if we were to give a number, whatever wasn't used, we'd give right back to the town, no matter what happens. We don't shoot to hit that number. It's just on a needed basis, but I think in talking with Jason, we'd be able to work something out on a monthly basis, depending on when we needed, how much, this is how much time we spent, here you go, and then work it out from there. But, you know, it could go either way. It could go that if the facilities manager needs no help whatsoever, then, but our phones are on all the time. You call us whenever you want. But if we need to get involved, like we've done in Randolph, we're still doing in Littleton, even though that job's been over now for over a year. You know, it's just
What sort of
something.
things are you still doing in Middleton?
Just, basically, it was warranty items that the contractor didn't take care of, so we have gone out and facilitated somebody else to help them finish the project. So lights were flickering, lights, they have any issue with lights, we went and found the electrician for them, ended up getting them lights again from the, original manufacturer. Stuff that should have been taken care of by the electrical contractor, but unfortunately, in this game, once they're done, they go on to the next one. And if they are slow, then they'll pick up the phone, but it always comes along with, yeah, I can help you, who's gonna pay me? It's like, listen, this is your problem to start with. But, you know, we see through till there are no questions anymore, and everybody's happy.
I would just want to chime in here, because same thing's true of our company and our consultants as well. We expect, you may not need to involve us in many things, but it's always appreciative when we get copied on things, even if they don't. You know, I'd like to know what's going on in the buildings, and if there's something develops into a problem, we expect that we would be called in to assist the town. We're not charging for that stuff, that's just part of the service. And there also will be an 11-month walkthrough and with all of us, Kevin, his team, my team, to go through the building before the warranties expire to make sure that everything is in fact working correctly and there isn't any questions that nobody has decided to ask before the warranties expire, so that you still can take advantage of contractors that are on their clock. And then there will be a counter-season startup, so the boilers and all the stuff for the heating season will also need to be started up. So commissioning consultant, and we'll get reports from that. We'll, you know, the contractors that did that work will be involved in the startup, so that will all happen in the fall when that equipment will go up. And so I don't know how much in time involvement, you can speak for yourself, I don't know how much time involvement it will encounter, but typically what we've seen is that, you know, there's the issues that crop up when that happens. You know, once you start calling for heat and needing heat in all the rooms, suddenly you realize that zone valve over there is bad, and it's
So
gotta
you
get
don't
replaced.
commission the heat at this point, you wait till the heat is required?
We need temperature to really get it to operate correctly.
And to Jeff's point before, we'll work with the chiefs, both of them, because they'll be the user group as well as facilities. Over that period of time of the year, things will start to crack. We won't call everybody back the first time you see one crack. You have to give it some time, let the building settle, go through a whole entire season of cooling, heating. Then you pretty much have a good idea after that first year. But in the 10th month, we'll come back and go over another list of saying, this is where everything's found. Maybe we'll ask the chief, put a piece of painter's tape on it, we'll take a photograph of it, note it, and then give it to everybody at the end, because Jeff, again, needs to see that list. So, okay, this is cracked, bring your carpenter back in here, let him fix the crack, let your painter come in and paint it over again, because you have that whole entire year, period.
Any other questions on Vertex specifically? So I'll move that we approve both invoices as presented by Vertex. Is there a second? Second by Brennan. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. I'm not planning to vote on the next invoices, so if someone wants to move those.
I make a motion to accept the 8 total invoices totaling $86,469.54. Do you want me to list off the individual invoices? Anyway, prefer? Okay. Do I have a second? I'll second. Second by Ms. Barrett. Any more discussion? All in favor? 5 points.
I purposely skipped over proposed change orders from general contractor. There are none. But we continue to have ongoing conversations with Vertex in context. That doesn't mean there aren't any coming. There was a slew of CCDs, which were directives to kind of change in the final hours and days leading up to temporary certificate of occupancy. The slips are still in process of being tallied. One of which, the main thing was, we talked a lot about the driveway at the last meeting. And kind of, I sent an update saying it's resolved, and anyone that's driven by has kind of seen how it was resolved to meet the needs of the fire department. I don't anticipate that change cost a lot of money, given how long it took them to do it, which was candidly nice to see. But it's things like that that had to kind of be field modified last minute that we're going to see some of. So I do expect we'll see that probably next month or.
Yeah, the list has been generated. Some of these things, they've been kicking around, and we're just waiting for the paperwork. Jason and I had a conversation of why haven't we seen these things yet, and we're just waiting for the paperwork to catch up with where we are in the project, most of which is waiting for subs to stop doing work and actually fill out the paperwork.
So that'd be likely next meeting?
Yeah.
We were hoping for this one, but didn't happen, so.
So I'll put it this way. I made an offer to the principal at CTA last week when we're all having our, I'll call it kumbaya moment of, we got to the date. And he's like, I got it, but we don't have anyone to do the paperwork. So I'm like, well, I can't pay you.
But I'm sorry, they didn't have any?
They didn't have time to go through all the paperwork.
Oh,
There's a
okay.
process, right, in
Yeah.
terms of paperwork. So they have to generate the paperwork. Context has to approve it. We have to approve it. Then they can put it in a requisition. So if you kind of think about the timeline for the individuals that actually perform the work, it's a little bit of a lag. But we're on notice of saying there are some things we absolutely agreed to and we're willing to pay, but they didn't really want to play ball quite yet. So hopefully next meeting. In terms of meeting schedule, I was planning to do September 9th, which is the second Monday of the month. That'll be 3 weeks from tonight. I'm obviously skipping the first one due to the public holiday. Are there any thoughts on that? So we would have kind of the small ceremony in the morning and then a meeting in the evening? Okay, so unless the departments aren't operating, we will meet in that building.
Would it be unreasonable to try to have our meeting right after the 7:30 ceremony?
If we think we're gonna have a quorum there, I'm more than happy to do it then.
I could do either. I could do it.
All right, I'll pull the 3 that aren't here, and if all are planning to be there, I think that's a great suggestion.
I'm supposed to be out of town, but
You're
It's
gonna
okay.
miss it either
I'll
way.
miss it.
Okay. Any other, so then I think my goal would be to go to monthly after that, because I think we can tell, we're gonna be hearing about little nicks and nats for a long time, and there's gonna be a small trail of invoices, but we can kind of figure out meeting schedule once we see where we're at on the 9th, unless anyone has a burning desire to schedule them now. In terms of project budget, John Lemieux did flip me a updated budget this afternoon. It needs a little work, so what we're gonna do is try to get the paperwork in order from CTA so that we really have kind of a formal readout. I think I got multiple, when we issued the press release last week, I got, the first question back was, that's great, you're on time, where are you at budget-wise? So I kind of gave the answer I've been giving very publicly, and still stand by based on where we're at and knowing what invoices are coming in and not. But I think we owe the town a much more formal accounting than the round numbers, and maybe we put, I'll call it an escrow aside of, hey, we may have this or that come up, here are the order of magnitudes of that, and, you know, kind of rely on industry expertise. But my goal was to try to have something for the meeting on the 9th, and then if the Board of Selectmen are amenable to it, doing it at their second meeting in September, kind of doing a formal readout from the committee of really where we've been and where we're at, which will then allow the chiefs to kind of get up and speak about the first couple of weeks of operations, what's working, what's not working, and then kind of take it from there. So, any questions on budget update? Any other business? Any public comment? All right, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wood. All in favor? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.